Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Simonian with the Neocon team, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for this program with Randy, Natalie, and Eric on reimagining our future workplaces. Let's just go over a few quick housekeeping items. Today's session qualifies for accreditation, and certificates will be emailed within 3 business days to everybody who stays on for the full session. More details on accreditation can be found on our Neocon website under programming. Also, the final 15 minutes of the program will be questions and answers. So if you have a question, please submit it via the Q&A box. Okay, so getting started with a little background on our presenters. Randy Howder is Managing Director of Gensler's San Francisco office, where he focuses on helping transform clients' organizations through new approaches to design, research, and experience. Randy has a background in strategic consulting and workplace design for a diverse range of industry-leading clients, including Facebook, LinkedIn, Zendesk, and Hyatt. Natalie Angles is Principal and Design Director for Gensler's San Jose office, where she's passionate about delivering immersive spaces that people want to experience again and again. Much of Natalie's work has been focused on workplace in the technology sector, where her leadership focuses primarily on the experience of next generation design and a holistic approach to space for the future. And Eric Klein is Director of Workplace Experience at Adobe, where he leads a team responsible for designing experiences across workplace, food, wellness, and events globally. His team's focus is to help amplify Adobe's culture and business by designing meaningful and inclusive experiences. So now we'll turn the screen over to Randy.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully everyone can see it. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are really grateful to be here with you today, kicking off this inaugural 2021 Neocon event. A little early this year, but we're really excited about October coming up and seeing everybody in person. But today, this virtual format will have to do. And we're really excited to be here to talk about reimagining the future of our workplaces. Switch here. As Lisa said, we're really happy to have a great team here with me today, Natalie and Eric. And so we'll be kind of dividing up the presentation, and then, as Lisa said, we'll have time at the end for some questions. So really excited to be here with you all today.
Thanks, Randy. You know, for the first time in history, the vast majority of knowledge workers have gone home. And it really began to alter every habit, every expectation of our work days. And so where the office once stood, a pandemic has left open a question, what is it for? And as we start to, think about this pandemic and what it's brought, it's both gains and losses. We talked about balance beforehand, but now we really see in aspects of what we've gained and what we've lost. And sometimes it can be a bit of both. As an extrovert, I think this is something that where, an introvert has gained, some of us have lost. And so we're really gaining a good bit of empathy as we start to, look at each aspect of our new work lives. And so a new era of choice and autonomy has emerged. We need to think about how employees will, start to work in this new future and new space terms. We're going to have places where people are coming in 5 days a week, 5 days a month, 5 days a year, and everything in between. And with that, we also need to establish new behaviors. We found these questions have fueled the acceleration of tools, policies, and thinking about what is emerging now. So, as a firm rooted in research, we needed to know what is everyone missing? And of course, as you can see, 74%, it's each other. But the other thing is that we were really looking at collaboration and knowing what others are doing. About 50% are saying it's more difficult at home. But then in the same token, we really don't want to give up autonomy, about the same amount. Really want to keep that availability to work in privacy, or in kind of your own terms as you move about. So how do we start to balance that?
Yeah, and it's really about meeting in the middle. 52% of people prefer this hybrid model, and a lot of companies are already entering this phase as we sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel with vaccines, and a lot of our clients are really actively starting the conversation about getting people back into the office, but realizing that this is the key to what we're learning, is this sort of middle ground. What a difference a year makes, and how shifts in our thinking have, moved from everybody needing an assigned seat in the office to really thinking differently about the workplace. And as Natalie said, what is key to what we're learning about is this idea of relationship capital, the power of spontaneous learning and collaboration, coupled with the need for undistracted focus. So really kind of creating this best of both worlds, where people have a bigger landscape of tools and choices in kind of when and where they do their best work. And so the potential of going hybrid is huge. And if we flex too far into the future, into full-time at home or full-time at the office, we lose the relationships, the team dynamics, and the creativity. And so this diagram is from our research that shows those in a hybrid model are actually seeing higher performance in their companies, stronger sense of creativity, stronger relationships with their colleagues, and better relationships with their managers. So there's a lot of good that we see in the hybrid world. And interestingly, we see that one conversation that started when we first started doing our workplace surveys almost a year ago in April of 2020, was a worry that while productivity was up and everyone was sort of like looking around, like surprised at how productive they were at home, that collaboration might go down. And today, a year later, we do actually show that a really strong and unfortunate dip in collaboration. So for workers that are full-time at home, which includes right now Natalie and myself and Eric, we are showing a 37% dip in kind of the time that we're spending collaborating with others. And that has really profound impacts for companies long-term. And there's a lot of conceptions or misconceptions about what this has meant, this work from home year has meant for people. Interestingly, there is no difference in the preference for hybrid work by gender. There's really no significant variation. Again, that sort of met the majority in the middle of all genders really is looking at this as the future. And similarly, by living situation, there's a lot of folks who think, oh, well, I live alone, and so I'd rather, nobody bothering me, or I miss, human contact. And those of us who have fuller homes or maybe less ideal work from home situations, we would think that there would be a preference to return to the office. And we're not seeing that in our data, which is surprising to us. So pretty much across the board, if you live alone, living with adult parents or with children of any age, there's very little statistical variation in the desire to either work full-time at home or return to the office full-time. But interestingly, it does vary by industry. And Eric here represents the industry at the bottom of this chart here, which is the technology industry. And at the top here, you see the consumer goods industry. And this makes sense. What each of our businesses do matters more than ever in how we work, and what that profile of hybrid work will be once offices open up again. But really, it's the connection to purpose and culture that is driving this versus the need for on-the-job learning and creation. And there are some real differences here in terms of, consumer goods companies. They have a lot of stuff. There's product, there's clothing and objects and things that they're working with. That's really hard to do through these little Zoom squares. Whereas, computer programmers and tech workers can actually do a lot more than they actually thought they could do at the beginning of this from alternate locations. So you're seeing a much broader spread of preference as you go down this chart, which is interesting to us.
That's right. What we did find is that most workers will want to continue or prefer actually in-person collaboration in the physical workspace. And in particular, we're finding that the office excels not only supporting collaboration, but awareness, problem solving, and inclusive communication. It's taking a lot more time for us to do these things from home. So, yes, productivity was up, but now there's some fatigue setting in, and we've become pretty determined that we want to get back in person. We need to focus on this collaboration, but then also not lose the equity that's been created as we were thinking about the way we work now. The other thing that's important to know is that beforehand we were focused very much on the individual, and now we're starting to see that there is a big shift into looking at how a team dynamic works and how teams really work together.
Yeah, and we took kind of a cue from that idea of how do we need to focus on individuals and think about how that team dynamic changes going forward. So there's an awful lot of work that we've done in the past around personas as a company. And I think what we really needed to realize at the beginning is that we need to rethink everything. So if you go to the next one, we're essentially, what our research project included was working with a lot of employees and really understanding and getting them to kind of do a daily calendar kind of review with us in a way to understand how are things really going? What does a lack of collaboration mean? How is work and life coming together for you at home? Obviously, there's lots of old models to look at how this worked for us in the past. So, we had what kind of technology do you need in the office? How do people need to use the office to be successful? And all of those things have really changed, because the reality is, as we think about a hybrid environment, we need different technology. We need to think about this model differently. So we developed a new framework, and that framework really started to look at what are the work profiles and preferences, and what are the life profiles and preferences. How are we able to get these things to be able to be maybe not in balance, but how are we able to design for how these things are changing based off of how the world's changing? So as we started to do that, we saw there's some very natural tensions. There's people who are so excited that they get to work from home and totally comfortable getting all their work done. And then there's some people that have no interest in working from home. So as you're kind of going through and you're seeing how these graphs are either lining up or completely not lining up, that was a lot of the sentiment that we were hearing from employees. So where they were able to line up, as you kind of look through the diagonal, we found that there were about 5 total that really worked for Adobe, or that we were hearing regularly from our employees. And as we looked at maybe some of these things can naturally be easy to design for, there's a couple that have some real tension that we have to create better solutions in order for them to be successful in the future. So of those 5, we ended up with the office lovers, where it's their happy place. Boundary seekers, where they understand and need that sanctuary that they currently don't have. Fluid adapters. And I think we've seen a lot of this in the past. you hear a lot about it in predominantly sales organizations and things like that, where they can kind of do their work anywhere and they're very used to it. Connection seekers, so these are the extroverts who are really struggling with, kind of being in home, really want to be able to stay connected with other humans. And then the thriving homebodies, and these are the people that have really flourished in today's world. And how do we connect them in the right way going forward? So this is a bit of an eye chart, but I think it's a great amount of information to be thinking about, because we need to understand how people are going to behave. Because as we take these different individuals and understand that you may have each one of these personas on a team, how do you create solutions for these people to be successful? How are you helping them with the things that they're struggling with? How are you helping empower the things that they feel like they can really do, both in the office or at home, depending on what their persona is? How are we able to really create great experiences in areas where they feel they're most stressed? So this was a really big focus area for us as we started to think about our individuals, and at Adobe, our greatest asset are our people. How are we able to really take care of them and think about in the future how we can get all of these personas to be able to feel comfortable in their best mode, and then also together.
That's right. So, at the beginning, we talked about, okay, so what is the office score? And we are finding, yes, as we looked and dove deeper into personas, what people were missing, we did find that the future still needs a workplace. It might be different. It will be different. It should be different. But it's really the glue that binds teams. It's about people and place and culture together with technology and policies, giving agency and equity to all of the work modes. So what does that mean? We're going to start to unpack that in terms of experience and in some space types, and then into the future. So with a connected experience, that's what's needed. And we were able to start to articulate that a place was no longer operating on its own. It's this ecosystem that brings together the people and the place and the technology to really give your employees choice and flexibility, autonomy. It's keeping them connected to your culture and letting that thrive. It's what we've been calling a workplace with heart. So with this ecosystem, we need to make sure that it aligns with purpose in the face of complexity. And we were finding that there were so many different people getting involved, and it has just made it such a robust and diverse conversation, which has been extremely refreshing. And in this ecosystem, we started to look at conditions and engagement, context, enablement, and where these alignments occur. That's where we're able to integrate these human-centered tools and strategies that really can work across all the facets of the ecosystem.
Great, thanks, Natalie. And what does this mean? In a typical work from home, the neighbors decided to do some leaf blowing, so I apologize if you hear that. But that's part of this conversation of are you working from home or living in the office? And to do this really requires policies, new social norms, and work etiquette so that we can create boundaries. And as the world opens up, this just sort of creates more choice and more flexibility. It will also require a new kit of parts to support those policies and norms that fit for the individual circumstances of your company and what your teams are trying to achieve. And so, what we're going to walk you through is sort of just how we've been thinking through some of these spaces. What is the right home office? There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And as the longer this has gone on and we've all sort of adapted and changed our home offices, the home office will not necessarily be all at home either. It could be spread across different locations. But how will it work with you and your brand? How will you start to integrate your company culture into employees' home offices or alternate locations? And this also recognizes that, you know, employers can really be design partners. And these three scenarios you see on the screen is someone in the upper right who has a great setup and can be really productive. Other situations are really different, where people are living with different people and in different situations. And as we saw from the data, it doesn't really affect their choice of when and how to work at home, but acknowledging that people are different, and it's a real design opportunity to kind of meet them where they are. Similarly, you know, the new sort of focus on amenities once people are in offices, you know, that physical and digital spaces can help people find calm, creativity, or energy. So, you know, once it's, you know, once an amenity, spaces for rest and reset will actually become part of our daily lives, and not necessarily a special type of space, but just part of a landscape of choice in which we have that flexibility. And, you know, working remotely, it's about staying connected and making work for individuals. So whether that's, you know, remotely or from the office, it needs to work for individuals and their teams. And we need to build in smarter features about, you know, lateral awareness of kind of where others are and who's coming in the office that day or who's working from home that day. And that sort of coordination and increases the value of the collaboration when it's happening. So really focusing on how we can create those tools that create those more seamless connections, as Natalie was mentioning. And thinking through you know, spaces that used to be solely dedicated to those who were in the office. Again, what used to be a kind of a pure amenity space, a kitchen, becomes another point of connection. So thinking through not just the sort of traditional workhorse spaces of the office, but also these social spaces. You know, food and the kitchen are still our connecting points. That may be actually one of the ways that you know, we can facilitate greater connections in our offices. But being able to have a virtual coffee, as we've been doing, you know, we've learned these new behaviors. How many virtual coffees, virtual cocktails have you had? But being able to extend that into this hybrid world, to have a virtual coffee with a colleague who may be working in another geography or working from home that day, having opportunities to discover the different communities that exist around the office. We've all gotten glimpses of our, you know, homes and dogs and kids and gardens and hobbies. How can we extend those personal connections, which have been really valuable to people? So finding other employees who enjoy, you know, the type of cooking that you do, or gardening, you know, just what other people are up to during the day, and letting that flex into different parts of the day. You know, and so in order to not have that kind of FOMO, we'll need digital and technology solutions to support these remote happy hours. So, you know, if you're working from home that day, but there's a team happy hour or birthday celebration, not being left out of those types of situations is going to be really, really important. And similarly, you know, making the office more agile so that when you're there with your team, you're there to accomplish very specific things, that these spaces work flexibly. So if a team is descending for a workshop or to make progress on a deadline, having a space that works flexibly for getting ready to go into the session. So the kind of the pre-meeting mode of how the open workplace might facilitate a team working together, to the post meeting. So you wrap up your workshop, you wrap up your team meeting, and then there's individual tasks or small group tasks that people need to do. So again, creating those environments that allow for that ease of flexibility and for different people to accomplish different types of things. It's no longer the sort of, as we put on the slide, the spectacle of productivity where everyone's sort of sitting at a desk, you know, pretending to be productive, or in a lot of cases actually being productive, but really designing for how the team needs to function. Because a lot of what people do had done traditionally in the office is going to happen in other locations, whether it's at home, a third place, on the road. You know, we just need to create that agility for teams to be successful.
That's right. And similarly, you know, that needs to happen with conferencing. And so, you know, what we're calling the new corner office, you know, how do you take these larger traditional conference rooms and turn them into something that can be flexible throughout the day for the different, you know, hybrid scenarios that we're going to be having, as, you know, Randy was talking about. So creating this mixed reality conference room that really allows participants to share information, whether they're there or they're, you know, in a different location. How do you really dive deeper into those technologies with whiteboarding, with, you know, mirror technologies to really allow that to function well? And then, you know, getting into maybe a wind down mode, or even having a working hybrid lunch. You know, how can we start to you know, bring that into the day, or even if on the next one, if we start to look at, you know, will teams begin to you know, hold a meeting space for maybe a week or 2 weeks, and then come in, dive deep. They'll need to, you know, flex into workspace. And then get into these other modes throughout their week. But allowing that flexibility, it's something that we're really going to need to invest in. And then we're starting to look at what we're calling the threshold. You know, we've learned to appreciate fresh air and outdoor spaces to meet and eat, I think, and embracing that in new ways, you know, as you can in your climates. I think we're, the three of us are very lucky and where we live, but allowing that threshold in the space to, you know, really work towards autonomy and safety for employees. And then also amenities. We've touched on this. This has long been a hot topic in our industry. And looking at, okay, so if people are coming in for part of the time, can amenities move to edges so that, you know, communities can opt in to non-secure zones? And similarly, you know, how do we begin to rethink the equity of amenities experience for those not physically present? And I'll show you a great example in a minute. We've also, you know, really turned our attention into purpose and reconnecting. I think we all have a desire for reconnection into our communities and outreach. And so this is a new amenity that we're starting to see pop up in a lot of conversations. And then finally, you know, the broadcast fitness studio. So those incredible fitness classes that everybody loves. But, you know, is there a way to create a broadcast scenario and a connection to home or a connection to another place so you can still take that class regardless of where you are?
Yeah, so, you know, the question here is, you know, we've seen this vision of the future of this hybrid workplace, but, you know, Eric represents real life. And, you know, it's really a great story, I think, that he started to tell with the personas, but really, how is Adobe bringing this all together? So Eric, given what we've just discussed and the development of those personas, what is Adobe doing to bring all of these ideas together?
Well, it actually starts with kind of putting a stake in the ground, which is this statement for us, which is the future of work is going to be flexible and hybrid, enabled by a digital-first mindset. And I think we're very fortunate to be Adobe and understand what a digital-first mindset can be, and actually one of the things that we help create for our customers as well. But based off of a lot of the things that Natalie just talked about, you know, there's so many different ways that we can empower this journey. So what we did was we started to think about, okay, based off of this stake in the ground and this vision, how do we want to be thinking about reimagining experiences in the future, especially considering using that persona mindset and really trying to keep things human-centric in a virtual world, which is a bit of a challenge, but we're not afraid to try to do some storytelling. So what we did was we tried to put ourselves out there into 2023. And I don't have my sci-fi but let's all get into a new mindset of out in the future a bit. what things might be for us. And it really helped us focus on the future. Because it is hard to get past what reentry to offices mean, and how all of our lives are going to be different. But we do know that it's going to take blended presence. And so that's, people at home and people at work. And what we did was we took these cute little characters and we really tried to have them represent in office, at home, or globally distributed people, which are very representative of our teams. So not only are they being represented via persona, but also through our team lenses and archetypes. So we started with really looking at the moments that matter. Specifically, how's your day going to start? And I think there's a whole lot more intention that goes into what your day is going to be. And having that digital first mindset is going to be critical. So one of the things that we actually have been focusing on now that will prepare us for the future is our own version of an application that really helps connect people. So as you're coming in, you're thinking kind of nostalgically about, oh, well, I used to come in and go get coffee and I see everybody that I knew. How do we start to bring that into reality? So it's some version of being able to create presence for people, irregardless of where they are, what they're doing. That idea of being able to opt in to these experiences and really understand, hey, what's going on today? What can I be a part of? How can I connect from a team level, maybe beyond a team level? Is there a community that I'm interested in connecting with? Or is there something going on bigger within Adobe? How am I getting access to that information as I'm starting my day? And then really thinking, one of the benefits of this whole process is it's so much more than just remote work. As you're thinking about asynchronous work and really starting something at the beginning of the day and being able to pass it along through your team for progress, there's been this actual maximization of asynchronous work and getting to include people who are more globally distributed in a more fair and inclusive way. And I think the real interesting challenge that we have is as people come back to the office, we start to think about, okay, now there will again be the haves and have-nots. What we're trying to do is design to oppose that. How are we able to include someone who might be joining from Tahoe in a conference room in San Jose, or when someone's starting their day in Paris so that they can understand the progress that that team made throughout the day? How are they able to easily connect to where things are and understand what's going on? Or even beyond that, someone might make a last minute decision that they want to go into the office that day and they hadn't necessarily planned out their day. When they come in, are they able to find a dashboard that helps them understand where their team's going to be, what their team's going to be working on, how they can be included and involved? And I think with all of that, and what a lot of us have struggled with is that idea of well-being. Being in front of the same screen all the time, having access to the right kinds of programs or breaks or things that we really need in order to unplug and use different parts of our brain in a healthy and productive way. So what we've actually focused on during the pandemic is going to help us so much in the future, which is easy access to be able to opt into how you can be more well. So that could be mental, it could be physical, and it shouldn't really matter where you are. What should matter is we want to create programs that people feel like are there for them. So that idea of personalization at scale, is it something where you want to connect with your team and do a group meditation? Is it that there's a group exercise class and you want to be able to participate even though you're at home that day? How are we thinking about being able to create applications that allow us to personalize a menu for what your current diet plan is, or nutrition effort, or what those things are that you're allergic to? How do you know even ahead of time what it is that we're going to have so that we can have it ready for you? And one of the big focus areas from our leadership is how do we continue to create the right kind of environment to help people grow? You know, as I said before, Adobe's employees are our most important asset. And I think a real focus area for us is how do you create these moments that matter in your development as an employee? And those could be casual collisions, it could be mentorship opportunities. You know, it's the little things sometimes that can create great opportunities for people, and networking opportunities and growth opportunities and project opportunities. How do we begin to create a framework and platform for people to be able to opt in or easily access to that? And when you do come on site, how can we accelerate your growth? How can we really make sure that, hey, I'm coming into the office, I get a notification that says, I'm going to be in the office for the next 3 days. Here's 4 opportunities of things that I might be able to opt into that may help with my growth and development. And if you're at home, you should have those same opportunities as well. But there are some things that we know people are going to focus on when they do come to site. And again, those things are collaboration, growth, you know, but also as we move forward, is it about getting work done, right? So you're growing, you're developing, you're well. How are we going to get work done in the future? And I really do feel like this idea of a digital first mindset allows us all to work in the right flow as a team, focus when we need to, collaborate when we need to. Things will be a lot more intentional. And I think what we're trying to do is design programs and solutions that will reduce cognitive load on how people make those decisions. So when you're on site and you need to do those things, what's an easy way to say, I need to focus, and it can take you to where you need to go to be able to get that work done. And you have all the tools you need. You have your monitor, you know, you've got easy tech to use. It's a quiet place. It's all ready to go. So when you think about focusing versus collaborating, we know that there's still going to need to be focused work in the office, even though we're thinking about the office a lot around community and hospitality. We're also thinking about people need to get work done, and they may need to get individual work done, even though they're coming primarily to focus on work with their team. So I think one of the things that's been a benefit of this time is really understanding how important community is to everyone. And I think it's actually helped us expand beyond site community, which has been a really big focus for us, into more of a global community. And I think while that global community will remain strong, we also know that coming back onto site, people are going to want those different layers of community. What does that look like? Are we, to Natalie's point, really focused on purpose and working with local communities and trying to impact things in our local markets? You know, are there communities around employee network groups and trying to make sure that we're providing allyship to each other? You know, what are these different areas that we can focus, and how can you easily navigate to participate and be a part? You know, how do we again reduce that cognitive load of, hey, I want to make a difference, or I want to be involved? And so that idea of being able to supercharge that through an app is awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. It's a really compelling vision that you are creating with your team at Adobe. I know that there's probably several questions in the Q&A, but before we get to those, I just want to thank everyone again for joining us today. I think this is a great series that the Neocon team has created in advance of the October show. And so we, again, hope to see everybody there in Chicago in October, but we really do appreciate the time you spent with us. We're happy to follow up on LinkedIn. So our contact info is here on the screen. This is being recorded, and so you have the chance to kind of go back and re-watch this presentation. But again, we just wanted to thank everyone for spending their morning or afternoon or evening with us, wherever you are. And with that, we're happy to take questions. I think there are several in the chat window, and I'm going to sort of be the the facilitator and ask the questions of Natalie and Eric. And so and feel free to keep adding them. So Eric, this is a question for you. Did Adobe survey your employees in creating the persona? So maybe talk a little bit about the process that you all went through, or we went through collectively, Gensler and Adobe.
Yeah, we, so specifically for the personas, we did a lot of individual interviews, hundreds of really more focused research with employees. We have done surveys as well around future of work, but specifically around these personas, we felt like we needed a different level of nuance to understand how people were spending each of their days, where their real pain points were, so that we could really paint more of a robust picture of what these personas could be.
Great. Another question, let's see. For entry-level employees, how do you see the hybrid mode of work? As you know, how is Adobe answering that challenge? I know one of my other clients have reported that on some teams, upwards of 50% of the team has been hired since the pandemic began, and so there's a lot of people who've never even been in that company's offices. So how are you handling that challenge?
It's a great question. You know, I think everyone worries about things like affiliation, belonging, community, culture. You know, how do you get indoctrinated if you don't have the opportunity to, you know, come into the office and see what it feels like to be an Adobe employee? And it's a hard challenge. So we have a whole work stream focused on what does this mean, right, for Adobe? And I would say a lot of it is around creating digitally first enabled experiences for people. You know, it's very difficult to be onboarded in an equal way, even from office to office, let alone whether you're remote or in office. But we do know that it's a focus area for us, not just on how you begin to understand the culture of the company you're working in and you're able to really thrive, but also growth and development. I mean, if you're talking about people early in their careers, that's really what they're looking for. How are we able to create mentorship and community around them? You know, how are we able to bolster their ability to feel empowered and productive? So all big focus areas for us going forward. Great.
So we have a question from the esteemed Tom DiRenzo here in San Francisco. So hi, Tom. This is for both Natalie and Eric. How do you best take advantage of the experiences of a neurodiverse and multi-generational workforce in this modern future that we've articulated today?
That's fantastic. That is like directly for Eric. I'll let him start.
I really feel like, you know, we talk about diversity and inclusion a lot. I think one of the most important parts of being successful in that is providing everyone an opportunity to have a voice, right? So as you think about a neurodiverse set of employees and a multi-generational workforce, what you need is, beyond a voice, you need to be able to create kind of the connective tissue between all of those things in formats and areas where people can really benefit from each other. You know, there's so much inherent benefit from having a diverse set of employees, and neurodiversity is absolutely a part of diversity. You know, how are you thinking about how those different life experiences can be shared in a really productive way? And I think, to me, that's why a lot of our focus and why you saw it in our top focus areas is around community, because, you know, some of these things come up in work, and some of these opportunities for learning and growth and understanding new perspectives have to happen in what feel like more organic settings, right? So I think we're trying to take a multi-tiered approach to how we can really benefit from each other.
That's great.
Yeah.
Natalie, there's a couple questions about the Gensler research that maybe between the two of us we can probably answer, but I'll start with you.
Okay.
So there's a question about the manufacturing industry and how does that fall on the ratings by industry? Do we have any data on that?
Yeah, we do. It falls under consumer goods. So they're in the group that for the majority wants to come back most of the time to the office. Yeah.
Great. And then we had another question. In the Gensler research and in the Adobe persona findings, how much did age play into the differences of opinion and in the importance of the workplace? We shared the gender and living conditions, but we did not include the slide on age differences. And I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, well, we can let Eric talk to the Adobe one, but from a Gensler research, it was reflective of who is in the workforce now. So as we have, a smaller percentage of Gen Z, a larger of millennial, the Xers that are out there, and boomers, age, it varied, and I think it was interesting, but not surprising in the answers. So it's exactly what we thought. The one that was surprising to us was on living conditions. I think that's the one where we were just like, really? We just thought it was going to be a completely different response.
Yeah, I would say from our perspective, what was so interesting about that persona work is that it really did not play into what I would consider to be a classically stereotyped approach to how people answered. It was a very personal response. So, not everyone has the same life circumstance at the same time, and I really do feel like while we're all apart, it's probably the most connected that we've been in regards to how people are answering some of these questions. So I think that the gender study that you guys had in your report is such a great example of that, where I think there's a perception. And I think the reality is that people have really found personal benefits to the different styles that they're looking forward to trying to adopt in a hybrid work environment. And those circumstances may change over time, honestly. They may get to a point where they don't have 3 roommates that they're battling with for Wi-Fi or noise distribution, or their kids may go back to school, or there's a million different versions of how these circumstances may change. But I think it doesn't really very easily fall into an age bracket.
Yeah, I think it is more on not just personality type, but your own needs, and I think that's such a good point about, what's relevant now. In 3 years, your life could be very different. You're going to need different things. So, we were finding that, and we talked to it somewhat about the flexibility that's allowed. We do need to get away from presenteeism, to allow for people to be able to work how they work best. Some people aren't going to be able to flourish, like Eric was saying, in the open office anymore when really they are at home, and vice versa. So I think we just need to take into account individuals and what's going to make them their best.
Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say, and maybe even going back to how people are thinking about work, pre-pandemic, there was there was an awful lot of focus on needing to have the ability to focus at work, and if the paradigm shift really has people coming in to collaborate, then I think as you think about focus space not needing to be as important, maybe that focus space is even more disruptive. Right. So are those people instead seeking those spaces out at home. And so that idea of what your work environment could be, it might be shifting. And I think that's another, so beyond the fact that your life circumstances shift, we may see a shift in the way that offices really need to be able to perform based off of the behaviors that people are expecting to really accelerate when they are in the office, which are very team-based, which of course will create conflict with the people who were already struggling with feeling like they couldn't focus at work.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple questions, thank you both for your answers. There's a couple questions which I'm gonna sort of blend into one question, but it really has to do with those, individuals. It's sort of related to Tom's question about neurodiversity, but recognizing that every individual is different, and some people have, are different abilities and different needs. And for some, the sort of digital first mindset can be overstimulating, or, people can feel oversaturated with technology and all of the different ways that we can connect. So how do you see people being able to manage that, in this future?
It's going to be it will definitely be a struggle, and I think that might be that is one of the reasons why we focused so hard on being able to try and identify the right tools so that you aren't overwhelmed by the number of places you need to go for information or types of ways that you might collaborate. How do we create something that feels equitable or ubiquitous across Adobe? Just so that we know that we need to be connected. How can we connect easily? How do we know that we're going to the right place? That's number one. Number two is we also need to understand from a process and a behavior perspective, we need time to focus. We need to be able to shut off reminders. We need to be able to turn off Slack messages, right? Like there are moments of, process and practice that we're all going to have to move to over time so that we can use the areas of our brain that we need to do the work that we need to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. And I want to point out, and especially in Adobe's, new approach on a digitally first mindset, it's in opposition, I guess, to what it was before, which the whole industry was, which is a physically minded workspace and mindset. We had to be present. We had to be physically in the office. And so it's not just about digital content or, kind of immersion in the digital realm when you're in a workspace or when you're at home or anywhere remote. It's really about, how are we utilizing the digital tools and technology to enable us to connect regardless of where we are. Yeah.
No, that's a really great point, Natalie. Similar sort of question, as we shared, there is something special about that in-person moment, that in-person time. So how do you balance the need to preserve the value and intimacy that being in person creates with the need to hybridize and kind of digitize the experience for those who are not in the room? So how do you get some of the magic, Natalie, of what we had before and make sure that we don't lose that in this digital future?
With a lot of focus and work. It's not gonna be easy, but it's something that we need to do. And it is gonna take a bit of time for us to figure out what is that balance, it's gonna be different for everybody, every company, what you're trying to achieve, your own goals. But it's going to be a balance of how do you maintain culture and let it thrive and not create this fear of missing out from one spot to another when you're not in person. And there's some thoughts out there right now about the people that are actually still on their laptop and remote and how they might dominate a conference or a meeting versus the people that are tiny in a room. And how we see them versus what we're used to now, like you're seeing today. So yeah, it's not just that the office will become the dominant. I think there has to be a balance.
So we've got a couple questions back to the survey, Natalie, and so one is for Gensler. You know, we noticed that design professionals, architects and engineers and designers, many of whom are on this call, were not couldn't find themselves on one of those industry categories. So where do we fall in the survey, the Gensler survey? I can answer that if you want.
Yeah, sure, you answer.
The answer is it's right in line with that sort of, you know, 52 to 55% of people preferring the hybrid work mode. And, you know, as architects, sometimes we're kind of the, you know, it's the little cobbler's shoes situation where we don't have the resources that an Adobe might have to really think through our own workplace future, but we are doing it. And I think we are, you know, prioritizing the value of being in person with the recognition of the flexibility and, you know, frankly, ability for some people to get really serious heads down work done, you know, both in the office or in alternate locations. So I think we fall squarely kind of in the middle of that data. You know, like the consumer products people, we do designers work with stuff, and that's been really hard over the past year to have everything, you know, FedExed or UPSed to your home to assemble a pallet. So some of those things are just going to be better when we're able to be in the office. But a lot of teams are building, you know, working on serious construction documents, and with everything in the cloud, they can oftentimes focus on those tasks more effectively when they're not in our office environment or, you know, bombarded with meetings throughout the day. So it's both the physical manifestation of our workplaces, but as Eric was saying, kind of really thinking through how we design our days and weeks and the experiences so that we can preserve those heads down times in order to prioritize the times when we can and want to be together.
That really, just to add on that, I think to the question that Natalie was asked earlier, how do you figure out how to design for everyone in this future? I think that's why it's so important to think about things like personas, so that you can do your planning and designing around experiences and solutions with people in mind, right? It's so easy to just you know, say, oh, well, we need a work from home solution. Every work from home solution should now have an in-office solution attached to it. Every office design should have a remote work solution attached to it. And you should be thinking about those specific people in your mind as you're working through that design. And it's critical.
That's a really great point. So with 2-minute warning. So I'm going to ask, it's a little bit of a softball, but I think a great question to kind of end with, Eric. You know, what is the one thing you are looking forward to in this new way of working?
You know, I probably overuse the word, but I love just how much inclusivity is really in our future. You know, there's been a version of it, you know, in this last year where we're all the same size square. And that's great. I do think in the future, this idea of people really understanding what it takes to have a great environment and work experience for themselves and with their teams, they're going to be more educated. They're going to understand, hey, having natural light, you know, when I see people, I can really connect with them. I think there's just more weight and meaning to everything that we're doing, whether or not it's the space that we're designing, the program we're delivering. But I think even within each of our employees, they understand, you know, we have a real opportunity to create a more compelling future for ourselves, right? So that, to me, that empowerment and that ability to be inclusive is super exciting.
That is great. And thank you, Eric, for ending on that optimistic note. And again, those of you who asked questions that we didn't get to, we'll try to follow up. And if not, please reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're happy to continue the dialogue. But again, we really thank you all for your time today, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you, Randy, Eric, and Natalie. That was a wonderful program, and it's inspiring to hear what Adobe is doing and how it's responding to today's shifting work needs. As we mentioned, a recording of this session will be on the NeoCon site in the next couple of days. We also hope that you'll join us for the remaining programs in this series. We have another one this afternoon and 2 tomorrow. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye, y'all.